Hello everyone. Today we're going to cover for loops. We're going to make the simplest type of for loop we can and explore the inner dynamics of it. So all we're doing here on our GUI, on our user interface, we click a button and it runs the code. Let's look at the code. First we're going to structure the for loop with 3 elements. The first thing we put inside there is something that we call the index. Then we want to put our if statement. So this is just like an if statement, except it's for the for loop. So it tells the loop when to stop. What the loop is going to do is keep going until it hits this condition. So once it reaches this condition, that's when the loop stops, and typically done through a number like this. Although there are other types of loops that we'll show later. Right now we're just going to focus on one that will stop once a number is reached. And now, to reach that number, we are going to do this I++. All this is doing is increasing this number I by 1. Here, this first, before, everything is broken up with these semicolons. So the for loop needs these 2 semicolons. It's got 3 sections here. This first section here is where we are allowed to define a variable. Technically, you could define any variable, but it's most often the one that's going to be used to keep track of the loop. So I is a very common integer that we use, and I'm setting it to a value of 0. The significance of starting with 0 will become apparent when we start going through arrays, but for now, I highly recommend use 0. Get comfortable with starting with 0. 0-based indexing is very common. So here we're just going to start with the number 0. We're going to loop 3 times. So you can see that I less than 3, if we're increasing I every time we go through the loop, when I is 0, this is true, so we loop. If I is 1, true, we loop. I is 2. I'm talking about this specific set of code. That's true, we loop. And then I is 3, so is 3 less than 3, that is false, end of loop. This last segment of code here, as I explained earlier, just raises the number of I. There are other ways you could write this code. This is one of the easier, simpler ways to do it. You could also do the I equals I plus 1, I believe would do the same thing. And looks right, yeah. So we should be able to do this too. If this makes a little more sense, all we're doing is we're saying take the current value of I. So for the first run of the code, it's 0. We add 1 to it, and then we change the value of I. It's going to evaluate the right-hand side before it evaluates the left-hand side. That's how this works. Now, we want to do something every time we run through the loop. So let's do something that will tell us a little bit about this loop. Just something very basic. So I have a little pre-snippet of code here. I'm just going to copy this over and then walk through it. So we have index. I'm calling I the index here. We're going to display the index. So we're just going to have message boxes pop up and tell us a little bit about what's going on inside this loop. So we have the index I here, and we're going to display the value of I. Now typically you would need to do the toString, But that string concatenation is converting this I to a string for us. It's an integer. Usually you would need to do this, but it's not required because I'm adding it to a string and C#'s doing that auto type conversion. So for simplicity, I'm just taking out the toString, but in other programming languages, you probably will need to do some type of type conversion. So here we have index, then we're going to just say what the index is, and then we're going to say the loop number. The loop number is a little more intuitive. This is the first time I ran through the loop. This is the second time I ran through the loop. And you'll notice that these two numbers are always off by 1. That's why I put +1. So let's just run this real quick to see what it does. It'll make a little more sense when we just run it here. So we have index 0 on the first loop. Index is equal to 1 on the second loop. Index is equal to 2 on the third loop. And we defined this to only have 3, so the program should end right here, as it does. I'm going to change this to I++. Pretty simple use of the ++ operator. I'm struggling to find the exact name of it. Actually, there's a technical name for it. In this case, they're showing it here as the ++ operator. And all that does is just, oh, it's the increment operator. Yes. We increment I here. So this code will run the exact same way as the other one. I'll just show that real quick, and maybe if you wanted to see how the program ran, you'll get to see it again here. You'll just see that the code's running the same exact way. Me changing it from ++ to I equals I+1. So this covers a lot of the basics of a for loop. Now, just to show you a little bit of what is important here, this for loop, that information, I can just pull it out if I really wanted to. There may come a time when that's needed. I would say oftentimes it's probably not, but I want to show that this loop still works when we do this. And then here we have I++. This should run the exact same way. So the most important part about writing this for loop, though, is having the semicolons. If I take the semicolons out, it's not going to work. But to better understand the for loop, now you can just think of it as an if statement. It's an if statement that's going to run until I less than 3 is false. So this structure here should look very familiar to a lot of the code we've already written. So let's run this and see how it goes. Index 0 is on loop 1, index 1 is on loop 2, index 2 is on loop 3, code ends. Runs the exact same way. It's just like an if statement. It's just like an if statement. And when we cover a different type of loop, you'll see that it looks just like this as well. In fact, I'm going to just show a quick way to represent the while loop, which is going to be the exact same code. A while loop does the exact same thing that we just saw the for loop do here. So let's demonstrate this with running the code again. On index 0, loop number 1, index 1, loop number 2. Index 2 is loop number 3, code ends. So by pulling these two out, we've created a while loop. What does the while loop do? It's just like the if statement. with the added component of what we've already explained about with the for loop, it keeps running everything inside of this scope block here until this condition becomes false. Once this condition becomes false, then the code stops running. So this is a short introduction into for loops, a little bit about the incrementer operation, and the while loop and how they're very similar to a for loop and the inner workings of what a for loop does. I hope this helped. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.